Most people who know you for probably a 30-minute window when you're on screen.
Marcelle.
I'm Marcelle Fontenot.
When did the idea of reading the news on television become a possibility?
It started, I probably was 6 or 7 years old. I was at the Children's Museum in New Orleans and they had a news set. And it was I was kind of hooked after that.
You've covered some of the biggest moments in American history. Just to name a few, Hurricane Katrina, presidential elections, COVID-19. You remember that one? Which one of those stands out to you as one of the hardest ones that you've covered?
Katrina. I remember saying to my photographer, it's hard to believe that I'm covering one of the biggest stories in my life, my first year in the game.
Have you ever thought about walking away from the news desk?
Oh, yeah, I have, especially a few months ago. I just thought maybe this is my time. We know the world is changing. We know that technology is changing. AI is a thing. Could an AI image replace me one day? Sure, but I still think human connection matters.
You worked at KATC a lot longer than I did, though. You were there for
19 years.
Then, in stunning fashion, you left to go to a direct competitor. Why? Marcelle, before you became a local celebrity, you grew up in humble beginnings in the small town of Opelousas. Tell me a little bit about your childhood.
My childhood was like most. I lived in Opelousas, in that small town. My parents, were hardworking, and I have a younger sister. And so we did the things that kids do, living in a small town. Now, it's funny because my dad is heavily involved in the community. And for years, it was, oh, you're Mr. Fontenot's daughter. I was always Mr. Fontenot's daughter. And now he laughs and he's like, now I'm just Marcelle's dad. And I'm like, sorry, Dad. The tables had to turn somewhere along the way. But Opelousas was a place that gave me everything I needed. I grew up knowing my neighbor and knowing the kids at school and knowing the people in my community. And when you went to the grocery store, you would see someone familiar and people were aware of how you were. And if you weren't doing well, they had no problems, letting my parents know about that. Hey, I saw Miss So-and-so at the grocery store and she told me you were talking in class today, and I'm guilty. But it was a good life, I was born in New Orleans. And my parents moved when I was a year old. And so I often think, what would my life have been like if we stayed in New Orleans? There's no way to know that, but I'm grateful for the fact that small town everything is where I come from. There's just some warmth and some good emotion and feeling and all those things. And my mother, we were fortunate enough as kids that we traveled quite a bit. So we were able to see lots of different things in lots of different places and then come back home into our safe, quiet space. Opelousas was wonderful. I am not bashful about my hometown, and I talk about it all the time wherever I go. And people ask me, and I'm like, listen, every community in Acadiana has its issues. Opelousas is not any different. But, I'm a believer in people, and I'm a believer in community. And so even without that, I'm still an Opelousas girl, and I wear the badge proudly. And I'll tell anybody that I am where I am now because of my beginnings there, my beginnings in my hometown. And it was just good. It was good to me then. It's still good to me now.
You grew up, you went to college at Southern University, which is the largest HBCU in Louisiana. What was your experience like there?
So I'm an Opelousas girl and a Jaguar at the same time. I was very familiar with that institution growing up. My family had some deep connections at Southern, and I swore that I wasn't going there because of how familiar I was with the campus. I was like, I'm not going. I'm going to go somewhere else and experience other things. This place is great, don't get me wrong. And then time came, and when you're going to college, it's expensive. And so I had scholarship money from other schools. Most of them were out of state. and so that was an expense. Louisiana TOPS program was a great benefit. And so I made a decision that, okay, I have this scholarship and TOPS, and I don't want to pay for school if I don't have to. I don't want my parents to have to either. So I'm going to, use this this money, this scholarship money, and this money from the state, and further my education. And it's the best decision I made. I was very familiar with the campus and the people there, but I was able to step away from what I knew and become just a student. I was insistent on doing that. And Southern gave me everything I needed for my career, but she also gave me everything I needed for life too. It's where I grew up. It's where I established friendships that I will die with. It's where I was able to, there's this time in life when you're still very young, but you feel older. You're late teens, early 20s. You know it all, right? And you know nothing in actuality. And the campus afforded me the opportunity to experience things, but still there was someone there in my corner to say, hey, how's it going? Do you need anything? So I left home and went to this college campus, but it was still home. They let me be me, but still there is this warmth and there's this sense of care that you might not get on some other campuses. There are schools that have as many students on campus as my hometown, but that wasn't the case at Southern. And, it's an HBCU. It's an historically Black college and university, and it was just a place where I was able to be grounded in all things that made me me, and learn new things about other people and put me on my career path. My department had everything. It wasn't, necessarily the shiniest and the most up-to-date equipment, but it had everything I needed. And I did there what I would have done at any other institution. And my professors were extremely hands-on. And they knew, the department was very small, so we were a family, and we nudged each other along. We knew each other's strengths and weaknesses, and did our best to help forge through those, and give our classmates and our department mates what, if I had it, and this is where my skill was greater and you needed it, we could spend that one-on-one time together. It was really, really a good experience. It is indeed where I wouldn't change it. I wouldn't change the fact that I had my small little nest. The nest allowed me to fly when I needed, but I could come back, regroup, and then fly again and fly further the next time.
When did the idea of reading the news on television become a possibility?
It started, I probably was 6 or 7 years old, and I was at the Children's Museum in New Orleans, and they had a news set. And I read, See Jane Run, or whatever the book was at the time. And it was I was kind of hooked after that. My elementary school had school news. And so there was this little cable network in Opelousas, very small channel. And they would air the school news. And so I anchored the school news for my elementary school. I was also invited once to be, it was just a conversation. There was a host, and there were kids from different schools throughout the parish, and we converged on like an outdoor property and sat around a pond and just talked about what it was like growing up at that particular time. And we were able to just talk. And so I was my school's representative for that. And it just kind of fell into place over time. I wanted to be Janet Jackson at one point in my life. And, being on television was not I never really said I wanted to be a news anchor. That's not what I thought I wanted. But even beyond elementary school into middle school and high school, I found myself, my club needed a host for whatever we were putting on for the student body. Sure, I'll do it. Those type of things just kind of kept lining themselves up. Call it, faith or a pathway that was already laid for me. And I just followed. And then when I went to college, I knew I wanted to major in mass comm and have a broadcast concentration. And fortunately enough, I interned and got a job, and, the rest is history.
Most people who know you for probably a 30-minute window
Yes.
when you're on screen. Can you define what exactly you do as a news anchor?
So as a news anchor, the baseline of what I do is present the day's news, right? You know, I sit behind a desk and I tell you about what has happened throughout the day, whether it be locally, regionally, statewide, nationally. But what you don't see, the things that you don't see, we come in the afternoon and we have met as a staff and we talk about what we have. My work day starts at 2:00. And so there have been people working on gathering content all day long before we get there. And so we meet as a body to talk about, hey, this is what we have today. This is what we're covering. This is what we need to know. This is what we don't have, those types of things. So the day starts with just a meeting, our planning meeting. And then at that point, we get in and there are things to do, you know, emails to check, phone calls to return, those kinds of things. We take care of little office duties. And then it's time to get in and to get some content done. And so at News 15, there are a plethora of shows. We have a noon show, well, mornings first, a noon, a 4, a 5, a 6, a 9, a 10. So when we come in the afternoon, the 4:00 is the first show to still go on air. And if that show needs some help, we jump in and we write. Jim and I sit next to our producer for the 5 and the 6. And so we typically talk about what we have for those shows and what we need. And if there's information that we need to gather, if there are questions that we need answered before we hit air, that's when we make those phone calls and make those connections. We too pick up the phone and we'll call. And there's a news desk, there's a team that takes care of bringing in information, but if need be, we're not bashful about that. That's not above us. We make phone calls and we ask questions and we do those things. And then by the time the 4:00 show gets off the ground and on the air, it's time for us to really focus on prep for 5. And so we're in it. You know, we're in every script, reading every line, dialoguing to make sure that there's video there. And what about the graphic? And, oh, well, maybe this isn't the best wording for that graphic. Let's talk about what we should say instead. Or this is what we've written, but let's just change that a little bit. So we do a lot of editing, lots of rewriting, restructuring for our voice. You know, the producer does a great job of getting the story done and getting it concise as possible and well written. But we each speak in our own way. And so there might not be much, a tweak here or there. Or if new information comes in, we end up rewriting an entire story. Then we go on the air at 5. We get off 5:30, come back out, do it again, the same thing, the same editorial process for the 6:00. After the 6, we stay in studio for a bit after the show and record what we call topicals, but they're essentially commercials promoting what's coming up on the later newscast that will air before they happen. And so we do those, and then I go home for lunch, dinner break, and then come back and get ready for same thing at 10. You know, same show prep that happened in the earliest happens for the 10:00 as well. We knock that out in 30 to 35 minutes, and then we go home for the evening. So our window of the day is like 2 to 11, essentially. It's weird because like my day starts at 5 a.m. every morning. Get my boys off to school, go to the gym. I either have a lunch meeting or I need to do some household things, go grocery shopping or cook a meal, and then my work day starts at 2. So it's a very long day, but I wouldn't change my schedule for the world. Like there was a time a few months ago, before we came back on air, we were working at News 15. We just weren't on television. And we were working a different shift. And it was like 9:30 to 5:30. And I'm like, how do people do this? How do you work when do you do things? When do you get things done? And it took some major adjusting for Jim and I both. We were like, wait. I mean, we would get up and it was time to come to work. And then we would get off and we'd be so tired that there was nothing happening in the evening hours. And it was a struggle. But you know, folks think, oh, you work till 11? And I'm like, yeah, I work till 11. But it works out well. Like, Our day, the structure of the day remains the same, but the pieces of the day change. No day is like the day before in what we discuss in the content, in the filler of the day. The structure's there. The box looks the same. The rundown looks the same every day. All the lines are there. You just fill it in with different things. So each day gets to be a fresh start. I tell that to reporters a lot. I'm like, we had a bad day. It's okay. Tomorrow is a new beginning. You can leave today where it is. Tomorrow will be entirely different. Our days tend not to flow into the next. You get a fresh start every day.
Throughout your career, you've covered some of the biggest moments in American history. Just to name a few, Hurricane Katrina, presidential elections, multiple elections, COVID-19. You remember that one?
You can't forget that one.
Which one of those stands out to you as one of the hardest ones that you've covered?
Katrina. I was a year in at Channel 3 at the time, and I was fresh, and I remember saying to my photographer, it's hard to believe that I'm covering one of the biggest stories in my life my first year in the game. And literally, I was in New Orleans the day after the storm. Just me and a photographer and our Ford Explorer heading on down, getting what we could. And we couldn't get beyond Metairie at the time without a boat. And I remember being on I-10, walking along the interstate. And at that time, it was next morning, and we were just figuring out, able to see through the sunlight what exactly it looked like. And a lot of rescues were still happening at that point. That was the major thing. And so there were these emergency responders and everyday human beings, all the same, doing the same thing, taking their boats out and coming back with people who had just been through indeed trauma. And I can remember, looking out over the interstate, and there's this high rise, and there are people with their windows open, and they're asking for help. The first however many floors are full of water, so they have moved themselves upstairs, and I couldn't get to them. I couldn't do anything in that moment. And so that day those days were extremely hard. I mean, we all lived through that. And but from a work perspective, you have a job to do. And so I had to do the duty of the job. I'm there to do the job. But as a human being, you can't ignore the madness that's going on around you, and seeing what you see, and not knowing what's beyond where my feet were dry at that moment. I entered some water, but as we're standing along I-10 on this overpass, you can just see as far as you can. There's this bowl is literally filled with water, and that there are people who are in need of help, are in need of someone just to hear them, see them, help them. And you're very limited in what you can do in a time like that. And so that was a time that I will never forget. I came home. The Cajun Dome was one of the state's largest shelters. And so for weeks, it was, not to mention, my home was filled with people we knew from New Orleans who needed a place. Come on up, My parents lived there. As I mentioned, I was born there. And so we had family and friends who were there who needed a place to go. So I would come home after, a 12, 14, 16-hour workday, and I would sleep on the floor because somebody else was sleeping in my bed. But that was okay because I still had one. They didn't. So sure, sleep in my bed. I'll sleep on this floor. That's not a problem. After being in New Orleans for a couple days, and it came time to come home, and doing what we could at the Cajun Dome. We spent lots of days there just talking to people. And there was a lady who walked over to me, and she said, "Ma'am, I need your help." And I said, "Okay." Not sure what she was about to ask for, but if she just needed to talk in that moment, in a time like that, yes, ma'am, what is it? She's like, I need help finding my daughter. She said she did not leave New Orleans. She stayed. Her dog had just had puppies, and so she didn't want to take the dog and the puppies away. And so she stayed through the storm. And she's like, I have no idea where she is. And she said, I need you to help me find her. And I thought, oh, okay. So we exchanged information. She was actually staying with a family here in Lafayette in their home, someone who had just come to the Cajun Dome, offered their house, their spare bedroom, their living space to bring people in. And there was a lot of that happening. People were just opening up their homes. And so she was staying with a family here. She gave me the phone number, I gave her mine, and I was determined. I was like, okay, I don't know why me. I don't know why in that moment. I was there, and so was she, and she chose me for whatever the reason. But I have to do my part to help this lady find her daughter. And I literally, every missing persons, Katrina survivor website, whatever it was, I was adding her name, what I knew about her, contact information for the mother, my contact information, just trying, because I didn't know where to start. I mean, you've got thousands upon thousands upon thousands of people who are no longer at home. They're now dispersed all over this country. It's like finding a needle in a haystack. But I can remember sitting at my desk in that newsroom after I was done for the day, trying. And I didn't know where to start, but you do what you can. And so the next day and days after, I would go back to the Cajun Dome, still working and covering the news there, but looking for her. And so we talked a few more times, the mother and I, after that. And then one day I happened to call the family's home. And I told them who I was and who I was looking. They're like, oh, well, she's not here. And I thought, oh no, And I said, have you all heard anything about her daughter? They said, yes, she called last night. She's in Houston. I didn't know that lady. I didn't know her daughter. I knew nothing about them. But the relief I felt in that moment, that not that any of my efforts had played a part. It wasn't even about what I had done in that moment. It was sincerely knowing that at least she knows where she is, one, just the peace of mind that brings to a mother, and that they would be able to reconnect, that it's one thing to know where people are. There were so many stories of tragedy coming out of New Orleans and what was happening to storm victims and where they were going, what they were doing, and just all the things. And so I just remember sitting at my desk and just this sigh of relief, and these tears flowed, and I still think about them. We did not keep in touch. I just hope that they're still doing well. And it's what we do is tough. It's hard. It's not the pretty things often. It's sometimes we're telling about tragedy, and it can be very daunting. However, there are those kinds of moments that remind you that there is good in the world. There's positivity, there are happy endings, and those are the things I think we need to keep ourselves grounded and aware. And people ask, like, how do you do it? How do you talk about all the terrible things all the time? And it's work. I don't internalize it as much anymore. But there's often one story or one person who still will tug at your emotions and your feelings, and you get the job done, but that doesn't mean you lose the human side of that. And so I think about that mother and her daughter quite a bit.
The reason we know each other is because we worked together at KATC from 2019 to 2021, which was just the two craziest years of all time. You worked at KATC a lot longer than I did, though. You were there for
19 years.
19 years. Mm-hmm. Then, in stunning fashion, you left to go to a direct competitor. Uh-huh. Why?
There were some things that came up on the corporate level, some changes that the corporation was making that affected KATC and stations across the country. They were changing their model, and their model didn't directly include what we were doing as our duties there. And so there were lots of meetings and there were lots of conversations, and they gave us some options. And so we had decisions to make at that point. And so we did. I said in my goodbye video that, not even my goodbye video, it was the announcement that we were leaving, but, and I still stand on it. Like, I am not mad at anybody at 1103 Eras Landry. That's the address at KATC. And I don't think they're mad at me. In life, you have to make decisions sometime. And so I needed to figure out what was best for myself and my sons. And I did. I didn't know what that would look like. There were moments where the uncertainty was unimaginable. After you've done something in a space for 2 decades, practically, to think about no longer being there. I grew up in that building. I lived my adult life in that space. And I interned there in college. I became a reporter there. And so it was really hard to think about no longer driving up every day, hitting that gate code, knowing that building backwards and forwards, and more than anything, being with the people that I had worked with, in some cases for a very long time. So it was tough. It really was tough, but necessary. I recognized that it was a period of mourning to some degree. And I realized that what I was mourning was no longer the place that I once knew. And so that made it a little easier. Those changes were making it a new space. And I get it. Look, I understand business is business. And unfortunately, there was an opportunity for us, which was also a wonderful thing, because often, you work with someone for so long, and then this type of thing happens, and you don't necessarily get to go together to somewhere else. And Jim and I were given an opportunity, not only as individuals, but as a team. And it worked out, and it's worked out for the better. And we were, you go to a new job and you're unsure and you're unaware, you don't know what you're getting yourself into. But our time there feels good. It feels like, okay, we might not have known what was to come over some time when we were dealing with all the unknowns last summer, but it worked itself out, and it worked itself out, in a beautiful way. We were able to stay together. Neither one of us wanted to leave Acadiana. We did not want to leave, but we thought we might have. We might have had to, even if it wasn't for a job in news, or even, we may have had to go. We may have had to seek opportunities elsewhere. And those plans and those ideas and those questions that we had just were able to fade away. And News 15 has proven to be a really good move. They are definitely, we are Acadiana focused, locally focused. And I think that's what people want when you watch local news, right? The word local is there for a reason. And it's really been a good meshing. We walk in and, I have 19 years experience, and Jim has, his 15 years of experience, and you have to learn a new lay of the land. You're learning a new landscape. But yet you have things that you carried with you into that landscape that could be beneficial. And so we've been figuring that out, and it's meshed really, really well. Their style and ours, things that they do differently than how we were accustomed to. And it really has really worked. People, it's great, but it really is good. Our coworkers are wonderful. We have a good time in our newsroom. We get down to business, but we also are able to step away from the business and who wants to work in an environment where it isn't pleasant and it isn't joyful. And especially in this line of work, you know, you need you need to laugh it off, and you need to be jolly about something. And so we definitely have that. It's a warm place to be in, and I'm hoping, and our hope is that habits are hard to break. You know, we've asked people to make a switch, and this community has stunned us from the beginning. From the moment we said we're leaving Channel 3, the response and the support has been far more than we ever imagined. You know, the news business, yeah, not everybody loves it. And we just didn't know. We didn't know what it would be like to say, hey, we're leaving here. Come follow us here. But Acadiana has showed up and showed out for us. And it's very humbling. And we're determined, if for no other reason, to still be who we are, who people knew us to be somewhere else, and do a good job at what we do every day. Because it matters. It matters to someone. We may not be talking about something in your town that particular day, but the town we are talking about and reporting on matters to someone. And so at the end of the day, I hope that people at home still see that we're here, we're invested, and we care about what happens here.
The way that your old station is shifting the model that they're following, what does that mean for the news industry? So like the average person may look at what has happened to you and be like, why would they get rid of this amazing talent who is leading the charge?
Right.
Why change that format?
Well, I can't speak for them, but I can say that in that time period, I had a conversation with someone who's in the business and has worked in markets all over the country, someone who I trust, and I asked the question, like, is this what's coming? We know the world is changing. We know that technology is changing. AI is a thing. And could an AI image replace me one day? Sure. And will this be the model? Who knows? Right now, it is being tried, and maybe it'll stick. Maybe companies across this country will say, "Oh, that works." We won't know for some time. But what I will say is, people, and especially here, in our meetings, there were discussions of no other market is like us, and people talk about the big city versus small towns and those kinds of things. And, we get it. You can do a lot with technology that you couldn't do when I started years ago. And so you can send a person out. You don't even have to send a person. Send the camera, get the info from wherever, bring it back. But I still think human connection matters. And I think people here have made that known. And not that there aren't humans working under that new model, because they are human beings. They are everyday people who are trying to do a job and do a good job. But I think what we noticed and what we saw during our transition is it makes a difference for viewers to have someone there to welcome them into the newscast, to carry them through it, and then to say thank you for watching and wish them well in the rest of their day and the rest of their evening, or until you watch us again. And so could that become a model? Very well could become a model over time, that we're seeing less of the human connection there and more of getting the job done. It very well could. I don't think it'll happen tomorrow. At least I hope not. I hope I have a little more time. But people have made it known, or are making it known, I should say, that who we are is who we are here. And, Acadiana is a beautiful place. And the news business, I tell reporters coming in and out of here that the news business is the same no matter the size market, right? What happens in newsrooms in little bitty, market 200 happens in newsrooms in markets 10, top 10. But Acadiana is her own place, and our people are like no others in the world. And we want that. We thrive off of connection. And yes, it's a television screen. I look into a camera, so I'm not sitting in front of you every day, but through the lenses and through the screen, I think people recognize that whether you're seeing me that way or you see me at the grocery store, you're going to get the same person and the same interaction. And especially in times of tragedy, you just want to feel like somebody cares. And I think those are the moments that will resonate and stick with folks. So could we see a model like we're seeing? Possibly. I don't think it'll be anytime soon. And I still think at the end of the day, people want someone, who they at least think is invested in them and what's happening.
Have you ever thought about walking away from the news desk?
Oh, yeah. I have, especially a few months ago. I just thought maybe this is my time. Maybe it was time for me to go. I've wondered if this is, you live a life and you do things for however long, and you think, is this what I am here for? Is this it? So yeah, I've had those thoughts and wondered, is this what else? Okay, what else am I supposed to do? Or is this it? And I really thought that was what was going to happen, that I was not necessarily, I knew leaving Acadiana might have had to happen, but I thought, okay, well, maybe this is just my time to leave news. Like, okay, I hear you. Changes are coming. Let me prepare myself. This might just be my time to leave news and do something else. I'm 43 years old, and I thought, okay, well, time for my life to just go in a new direction. And then it didn't. It happened in a new space, but not in a new direction. And so I was like, okay, well, maybe this is what I am supposed to be doing. Totally embracive of that. So yeah, I have thought, and my career has been a very beautiful one. It has been, I've experienced a lot that I probably would have never had if I had not worked in news. I've gone to places that I maybe would have never visited if it weren't connected to a story. I've learned about this place we live far more. You take it for granted when you live here. Oh yeah, I know where New Iberia is. Oh, I know what they do there. I know. But if you don't go and immerse yourself in it, do you ever really know? And so this job has afforded me lots of experiences and put me in positions, in situations and places that I probably would have never gone otherwise. And so that in itself has made it worth it. But I did. I have had moments where, my schedule's different and I'm raising 2 children, and is it best if I work, closer to their school time? And yeah, maybe, but that's not our life. This is our life. It's what we know. When my schedule changed a few months ago and I was working more traditional hours, like a 9 to 5, my kids were like, what are you still doing here? You're home every night. They were not used to that at all. It's not the life they've known. They've known that I'm around in the morning. I can, take them to the doctor if somebody's sick, and then mommy goes to work. I come home on my break. I eat dinner with them. We have story time, bedtime. We say prayers together. Mommy has to go back to work, and they go to sleep. And every night, before and I tell them I'll see you again before you see me, because I go in every night into each of their rooms and see them when I get home. And so I have thought about it. I have wondered, but my life is telling me that, no, you're good. This is good. Being in a new space has been reinvigorating. I'm doing the same thing, but there's a freshness about it now. And it's really, really felt good. Like, I haven't been as energized to walk into a newsroom and do this, 5 days a week in a very long time. And it really feels good. So I'm not questioning why the things that went on. I recognize that maybe it's just what needed to happen. And it has. And in the time, you know, you don't often see the clear sky because the clouds are so dark that are right in front of you. And it was dark clouds and thunderstorms at one point a few months ago. But things have cleared now. And once you get through the storm, what you see on the other side, and that has just been a testament to life, right? Like it's hard in this moment, but just get through it, like one step in front of the other until you get to that clear sky on the other side.
When I say the name Jim Hummel, how much does he mean to you?
You know, in life, you develop connections and friendships and partnerships, and some of them last and some of them don't. And not all connection is to fit a certain mold. And Jim Hummel is my partner. He really is. You know, people, we've been asked before if we're dating. We are not dating. However, we are two people who have an amazing respect for each other. He is the consummate professional. He is a journalist through and through, but he's a fun guy. He's a foodie, you know, and so we connect not just on the news desk. And we're very fortunate that we are two people who sit next to each other every day and will literally finish each other's sentences. We are so in tune that I know his breathing patterns, he knows mine. You know, we've been sitting next to each other as anchors for almost 12 years now. And so that happens. But I have good days, I have bad days, same for him. And I know when it's a not so great day for Marcelle, I can just look at him and be like, look, I don't have it today. And he's like, okay, I got it. And his energy feeds me and vice versa. And he's like, look, Marcelle, I'm like, all right, come on. You know, we were partners and a team prior to all that has happened with us through our transition. But we are more connected now than ever before. You know, you are put in this position where your life could very well change in a matter of minutes. And that can be hard. It is hard. And to have someone there, because we didn't know that we would be able to stay together. We didn't know what was going to happen. But we had some real candid conversations with one another as we were dealing with all we were dealing with. And he asked me some tough questions and I asked him some, just about figuring out the process. And even if he was to move on to something else and so was I, there were still some things that needed to happen in conversation. And who better than Jim to ask me? And so people see us every day, and that connection you see. And we've heard from lots of folks recently, but even before the transition, people would always say, you two just seem to really get along. And we do. We really, really do. So Jim Hummel is my partner. He is my friend. I trust him. You know, that is one of the most beautiful things about our dynamic is that there's this level of trust. And that trust has grown since this transition. And he's a good guy. He's incredibly smart, and just a good human being. You know, he's now a Southern boy. He's originally from Buffalo, and he loves Acadiana. And when he thought that he might have to leave, that was not what he wanted. He wants to be here. He's invested here, and this is home for him. And so, yeah, he's my guy. He's my man who sits on my left, you know. In our professional lives and in our personal lives, we're friends, and we're two people who are out to do well in the world. And it's good to do it when you have somebody that you can sit next to and know they have your back.
You are well known for being involved in the community. You are bringing your leadership, you're giving your time to nonprofits and organizations. Why is supporting your community so important to you?
I live here. I I know that a community is only as strong as the people who support it. And community is made up of lots of parts and lots of dynamics and lots of situations. And if we don't invest in where we live, then how will it thrive? And invest in not only financially, but invest our time, talent, and energy as well. I think that everybody plays a part in evolution and in securing what we want the future to look like. And I think, everyone can serve, in some capacity. There's nothing that is too big or too small. There's nothing that is not needed. And so I grew up invested in community. My parents made sure that we understood that, hey, there's this volunteer opportunity. Well, why do I need to volunteer? Well, here's why. And that's just what I've done, all my life. And I'm raising my children to do the same, whatever it might be, And I think that, and I really do believe that in order for an area to thrive, people have to give their gifts to it. And whether that's running for political office or, serving on a committee or whatever it might be, it's necessary and needed. And we want, when you live here, you take care of your home, the structure that is your house, when you live in it, in your space. Well, we have to take care of the structure that is our broader community too. And whatever they may look like, I think people sometimes get caught up in, I don't have the time, and or I don't have the resources, I don't have the finances to donate money, or, well, how about I give you a list and you send out 10 emails a week, or what, there's so many little things. And if there's something that you are passionate about in some small way or connected to, there's an agency here, or there's a group or a civic organization that probably support that same cause. And it's really just a matter of saying, what can I do to help? Maybe it's once a year, once a month, once a week, once a day that you do something towards that cause. And we live such a life that's so nonstop. But when you find those little moments where you can give of whatever it is, it's often more rewarding for the giver than it is for the receiver. And that feeling cannot be made, cannot be created. It's not something it's not artificial. It's genuine. And it's incredible when you can feel that. We recently worked for Day of Service, Martin Luther King Jr. Day of Service through Habitat. And we walked around neighborhoods and picked up trash. And we worked in Macomb Vise house and cleaned up that property, made flower beds and remulched some things. And, and we were exhausted, my sons and I'm speaking of. And at the end of the day, they were like, oh, Mommy, we did this and we did, and it was this great conversation about all we gave were a few hours on a Saturday morning. We did it last year. We walked by to go see, we planted fruit trees and some other vegetation in a park, and they wanted to go down and see, what their plants looked like this year. And so it's like, oh, I did that. I dug that hole to plant that bush. And, it's still there and it's still thriving, and it connected them with a new space. And so I will forever be involved. There are times, I can't be as involved as I would like, but I don't know how not to be community connected in whatever way that looks like. And I really do believe that the future of our wonderful place and space is dependent on how much people help now, so that later someone else can then pour back in.
You inspire tons of people every day. What would you say to someone who wants to follow in your footsteps?
I'm going to be a news anchor.
News anchor, philanthropist, generosity, any kind of...
I think, one, you just have to show up. first of all. It can be uneasy to show up in spaces where you don't know anybody or trying something new. But I think you just have to show up. As far as news is concerned, I am asked all the time by future journalists, what do I need to do? And this carries over into more than just being a journalist, but knowledge is power. And so my first bit of advice is always to read as much as you can. We live in a time now where everybody is a source. So, just vet your sources well. And, we never are out to tell someone how to feel or what to think. That's not my job. My job is to present you with what I know to be fact from the people who are telling it. And you draw your own conclusion. This is not about what you should think, right versus wrong. It's just the presentation of information. Here's one side, here's the other side. You decide what you think is right. And I do believe that being aware and being knowledgeable of your surroundings, of where you live, of what the needs are, of what you can do. I tell my sons, I'm like, if you see something you don't like in the world, do what's in your power to change it. And if that is, there's paper on the ground down the hallway at my school, or maybe whatever it might be. And your voice is one of the most powerful tools that we have. But you also have to be armed with a little something more than just, this is what I think. And so that's why I say a lot, like, just make sure you're reading and paying attention to, and just don't be fearful of putting yourself out there. Again, whether you're trying to be a journalist or just a member of society, don't be afraid of putting yourself out there. You never know what you have that could be the right thing that is needed at the right time. We just talked about community, and I do believe that people often think, not me, that doesn't fit for me, or that they don't need me. They do. We are beautifully crafted human beings, and your gift is different from mine, is different from someone else's. And when those gifts come together, they create a beautiful quilt or canvas. But without certain parts, it would not look the same. So whether you know your gift or not, because oftentimes, I may not know that I'm good at XYZ until someone asks me, hey, can you take care of this? And it's a little uncomfortable at first, but then it's something new that you've learned about yourself and can now put into a different space. I think knowledge is power. And I think we all have to be aware that we are necessary, and the gifts that we possess, whether we have uncovered them or not, really can make a difference.
I hope someone got value from our conversation today. Thank you
Me
so
too.
much. Thank you so much for stopping by. You have so much wisdom and inspiration that you bring. So thank you for coming.
Thank you so much. I appreciate being asked. This is a beautiful platform. I wish you much success, and thank you for having me.